Hello everybody, and this is Todd Jackson, and I'm going to be covering honeybee biology. As you look in the picture in the background, that's a couple of years back, and the snow here in Virginia was actually about 14 to 16 inches, and Kevin's going to talk about hive stands, and that's probably something you need to pay attention to when he talks about hive stands. So I'm going to be discussing honeybee biology, bee portion of the birds and the bees that your parents probably had a discussion back when you were younger, and I'm going to give you the truth about the bees. So no matter what they said, I'm going to give you the real story about the bees. The honeybee is an insect. The scientific name is Apis mellifera. Management of honeybees. When bees are in the wild and unkept, they're considered feral. Honeybees have lived in the wild until man came along and captured them, and this is called beekeeping. This started as early as 4000 BC with the Egyptians, and then later on perfected by the Europeans by about 1568. Management and care and control is the difference between keeping honeybees and having them. So it's the difference between a beekeeper and a bee haver. Honeybees are social insects. Under natural conditions, they nest in cavities and build multiple combs. The definition of a social insect: reproduction, division of labor, cooperative brood care, and overlapping generations. Basic honeybee biology. So I'm going to actually cover this a little bit more in depth later on, but I'm just going to go over it really quickly here. The honeybee is divided into three major portions: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. The head has most of the sensory organs. There are three rudimentary eyes called the ocellia. They have two compound eyes, the antennae, which have most of the sensory portions of the bee, the mandibles, which are used to manipulate wax, and the proboscis, which is used to gather water and nectar. Also in the thorax is basically the locomotion portion. It has 4 wings and 6 legs, 2 forelegs, 2 middle legs, and 2 hind legs. And the hind legs are used for compressing and gathering pollen. On the abdomen, you'll see sphericals on the side, which are used for breathing. And at the bottom of the abdomen, there are wax glands, which when the bees are younger, they're able to secrete sheets of wax for building comb. And then on the back of the bee, as actually everybody's favorite, is the stinger. There are 3 distinct members in the honeybee colony: 2 female caste and males. So there's the worker, female, the queen, female, and the drone, which is the male. Workers. They are female and basically comprise the majority of what's in the hive. They are developed from a fertilized egg. An average colony consists of about 20 to 60,000 workers. The lifespan of a worker is 4 to 6 weeks in the summer and 4 to 5 months in the winter. And the female worker is typically not able to reproduce, but we'll get into a scenario in which they will later on. So some of the basic functions of the actual bee is she has a stinger. Again, that's everybody relates the bee to the stinger, and that's used to protect the hive, and it's a barbed stinger. The honeybee also has pollen baskets on its rear legs to collect pollen while she's foraging for nectar. And again, this is used while she's outside the hive. And then on the bottom of the abdomen, there are 4 pairs of wax glands, which are used for producing wax to make comb. Division of labor among workers, based on 2 things: the age of the bee and the needs of the colony. And again, this is actually highly elastic. So let's start out with the beginning of a bee. Once they've actually emerged as an adult, one of the first things they do is they start cleaning the cells. They are considered nurse bees for the first 12 days of their life. So their job is to nurse, take care of the young, and feed the brood. House bees. From day 10 to day 20, they build comb, they clean the hive, they accept pollen and nectar from the foragers, they perform the job of undertaker, they do climate control, and probably one of the last jobs before they become field bees is they actually perform hive guarding or guard bees at the entrance of the hive. And then the last portion of the bee's life is as a field bee for about 20 days until their death, which is about 30 to 45 days, which is about that 6-week period. And their job is to collect nectar, pollen, water, and plant resins, which are used to make propolis. Next we have drones. They are male and they are developed from an unfertilized egg. They are sexually mature 2 weeks after they emerge. Once they've matured sexually, they fly to a drone congregation area to mate with virgin queens on their nuptial flight. Upon mating, they die. He develops from an unfertilized egg and passes on the genetic material from his mother only. He provides half the genetic material in worker bees. His lifespan depends on the health of the colony. During poor nectar flows and honey shortages, drones may be driven from the hive. This also happens on the onset of winter as well. Drones can be created by laying worker honeybees, and we'll get into this scenario again. This is what'll happen. Queens. Queens are female, and she is developed from a fertilized egg. Hives normally only contain one queen, and is the only active reproducing female. She can produce 1,500 eggs per day at the height of the brood season, and can live 2 to 5 years. She mates with many drones to produce fertilized eggs. Her role in the hive is to produce eggs. She is the mother of all bees in the hive, and she releases pheromones signals within the hive for cohesiveness of the colony. So let's look at this chart here. We've got the queen at the top, and she can lay either fertilized eggs or unfertilized eggs. If they're fertilized, they're female, and they can either be worker or a queen. An unfertilized egg will be a male and a drone. The stages of development of a honeybee. The queen lays the egg. As the egg matures, it hatches and becomes a larva. As the larva matures, it gets capped and goes through a metamorphosis as a pupa and emerges as an adult bee. Beekeeping math. Out of all the stuff I'm going to cover during the honeybee biology lecture, this is probably the most important thing that I'm going to cover, and this will be something that you'll be using throughout your beekeeping journey. So let's start with the queen. The egg is laid, and at day 3.5, the egg hatches. At day 8, the larva is capped, and day 16, the queen emerges, and at day 28, the new queen should be laying. The worker. The egg is laid, day 3.5 hatches, and at day 9, the larva is capped for the worker, and day 20, the new worker emerges. And around day 42, they should be out foraging for nectar and pollen. The drone. The egg is laid, day 3.5 it hatches, day 10 the larva is capped, day 24 the drone emerges, and around day 38 the drone should be headed to the drone congregation area for mating with virgin queens on the nuptial flight. Eggs and larvae. Here's a picture of some comb from the brood chamber, and it's very important as a beekeeper to identify eggs, because that way you know you have a laying queen, or at least she was there 3.5 days ago. So as you look at the bottom row, you can see the eggs in the bottom. As the eggs hatch at day 3.5, they start to form the larva. As the larvae grow and mature, they increase in size until they are finally capped. So you can see the top row, as the larvae start to get larger, that is actually day 5, day 6, day 7, just before they're capped. Unfertilized versus fertilized, or drone cells versus worker cells. And you look up at the top corner there, you can see the drone cells. They're actually bullet shaped. They're raised above the comb surface, whereas worker cells are flat and smooth with the surface of the comb. Surrounding the actual brood area is pollen, and outside that area is honey. These are used to feed the brood. So let's talk about worker versus queen. Any fertilized egg has the potential of becoming a queen. All the eggs are fed royal jelly for the first 3 days as a larva. When is a queen made? Swarming. And this is the natural reproductive cycle of a honeybee colony. Another reason for a new queen to be made is a supersedure, and this is when the queen's pheromones start to fail. The workers can identify this and they make a replacement queen. And then last but not least is an emergency. And this is when something happens to the queen, and pretty much that's the beekeeper that does this one. They're the one that kills the queen, not keeping an eye on her, pinching her, rolling her, squeezing her, crushing her, killing her. Bad beekeeper. In all cases, these fertilized larvae are housed in larger cells and fed large amounts of royal jelly throughout their larval life. Depending on the location on the frame, you can kind of determine what type of cells these are. Supersedure cells are queen cells that are found along the center of a given frame. Swarm cells are found clinging to the bottom of the brood frame. In a swarming process, the old queen participates in the requeening process. In an emergency situation, the old queen does not participate in the requeening process. The new virgin queen. One of the first things she does after she emerges is she seeks out the other queen cells and kills the developing queens. If she encounters another queen, they actually fight to the death. After a few days, her exoskeleton hardens and she goes on her mating flight. She mates with 7 to 14 drones. After she returns from her nuptial flight, she starts to lay eggs a few days later. What happens if the new queen doesn't make it back? Say she runs into a bird or a dragonfly. Then you need to figure out what are you going to do at this point. So what happens if your queen doesn't make it back from her nuptial flight? You can order a queen and introduce a new queen. Or you can take a frame of eggs and larvae from another hive and introduce that and allow those workers to replace the queen and make a new one. So if not, what happens? So say that you fail to requeen the colony. Well, you're going to go into what's called a laying worker colony, where the workers actually start to lay eggs which are unfertilized. And at that point, you can look at the cells and you can see multiple eggs at the bottom of the cell. Number one is the abdomen of the worker is not as long as a queen, so they cannot lay the egg in the middle of the cell. Also, this is kind of in a panic situation, so they are laying multiple eggs. So this is what you'll see in the typical laying worker colony. As those eggs are capped over, you'll see all these bullet-shaped drone cells. And normally this is a situation that is hard to recover from, but with a lot of work and a lot of tenacity, you can actually take care of this and fix it again, but this takes a lot of work and some people really don't put the effort into recovering from a laying worker colony. So let's play Find the Queen. This is one of those things that you can tell that the queen's been there if you see eggs, but you need to also be able to identify the queen. So we're going to play a little game here at the end is identify the queen. So let's see what we find here. So here's kind of a bonus. You can see the queen right there in the center and she's marked. She's got a green marking on her and she's marked. So this makes it really easy for you to find her. Right there. And again, this is kind of comes from the caveat of marking your queens. Now, a lot of people are not very comfortable with marking their queens because they're afraid to kill her or crush her. So if you want to practice, the best place to practice is on a drone. They don't have a stinger, they're large, and they're semi-disposable. So let's look at this frame. This frame, the queen is not marked, so the difficulty factor is increased. So let's see if we can find the queen. And there she is. So again, marking your queen helps you identify her, and when you're doing hive inspections, when you locate her, it allows you to be more careful when you're working with that frame. Next scenario, where's the queen? There we go, right there. There's the queen. Again, the queen's not marked, and it really makes it difficult to locate the queen. So our last scenario, when I was discussing queens, I mentioned that there was normally only one queen in the colony. Well, there she is. But in this scenario, there's actually another queen. And this comes where marking your queen really helps you out. This is most likely a mother-daughter combo. The daughter came back from a mating flight and did not kill her mom in the process. So marking your queens helps you identify what's going on in your hive. Are there any questions?